In this video, I'd like to discuss the upcoming Auston Matthews contract extension. I thought we should discuss where we feel he's going to land in terms of dollars and how he compares to other top players in the league. And that's coming up next. Hey everyone, welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. On this channel, we analyze and review all 31 NHL teams with an unbiased opinion, so if you're a huge hockey fan, hit that subscribe button now so you don't miss anything. Alright, diving into today's content, let's take a look at the Auston Matthews contract that's going to be coming up this summer. Obviously, Auston Matthews is coming to an end of his rookie contract, and is going to be looking for a mega extension deal upon the Leafs. In all likelihood, he probably will get the max term in 8 years, and I thought we should discuss what kind of money we feel he's going to fetch. Obviously, there's been a lot of other younger players recently getting big money contracts, and we can compare him to them and see where we think he's going to land. The main players he seems to be getting compared to a lot lately in terms of his youth and his importance to the team and his level of skill are Connor McDavid, Jack Eichel, and Leon Draisaitl. I've heard a lot of debate here on YouTube as well as to different NHL media sources, NHL radio as well, and there seems to be a lot of comparing going on and where there's lots of different opinions of where they think he's going to end up, what he's going to get for a new contract. So I thought I'd share my opinion, what I think, and I want you guys to comment as well and let me know what you think he's going to get for a contract. So first of all, obviously the biggest contract right now that's going to be kicking in next year is Connor McDavid. So obviously that's something to compare to. Now obviously Matthews hasn't accomplished what McDavid has as of yet. McDavid has an extra year on him. He has some hardware to his name. He's got a decent playoff run under his belt. So obviously, there's no way that Matthews can demand based on McDavid just on skill alone. Now, the one factor here that's going to play a big role is the increase in the salary cap, and we're going to discuss that in a minute because obviously that impacts contracts over year, because obviously it changes a lot from year to year. Depending on when you're doing your contract, it certainly makes an impact on what you get for money. Not just where you compare to other players, but what's available as well. So if you take a look at Jack Eichel's getting $10 million a year for 8 years. He signed an $80 million contract with the Buffalo Sabres. I think it's pretty safe to say, at the stages in their careers right now, that Auston Matthews has been a fairly significantly better player than Eichel. He's accomplished a lot more, and he's more important to his team. Eichel's pretty important to the Sabres, but you could argue that Matthews is much more important from an MVP standpoint to his team, just because he's really helped them get a lot further than Eichel's helped Buffalo get. They obviously haven't gone too far during his time there. If you also look at McDavid and Draisaitl, obviously they're a big duo in Edmonton. Draisaitl's making a fair bit less than McDavid, but obviously Draisaitl, even though he's very important to the Oilers, he's definitely not McDavid, and he's definitely their number 2 guy. So the big debate is that I keep hearing is, well, Matthews is going to land somewhere between Eichel and McDavid. Eichel's making $10 million, and he's a better player, so he should get more. And then you get McDavid making, I believe it was 12.5 is what he's going to be kicking in for next year. And say, well, he's not as good as McDavid. He hasn't quite accomplished as much, so he got to make less. Well, the big thing that a lot of people I find don't seem to take into consideration is the salary cap. Obviously, if you look at some of the other top players in the league and what they're making, they may be making a lot less than some of these younger guys. They're getting these big mega deals now. Because at the time, when they did their contracts, the salary cap was lower, and they just couldn't get paid as much. They'll just recently announced that the salary cap next year is going to be between $78 and $82 million. When they're looking at doing these contracts, they're not just looking at player skills, but they look at how valuable they are to the team and what percentage of the cap is fair to give to this player. So if you break it down all into percentages, it makes a lot more sense. So if you look at, for example, McDavid would be getting right around 15% of the cap going to him. So if Matthews does his contract and the cap is that much higher, we're talking $5 to $7 million more. Well, if you could argue that he could get the similar percentage of the cap to him and his value to the Leafs, it's quite possible we're going to see Auston Matthews get very similar money to Connor McDavid. It's not just cut and dry that you look at it and say, okay, well, Eichel's at 10, McDavid's going to be at 12.5, so Matthews gets 11 or 11 and a quarter or something to that effect. if the salary cap remained flat and was the same during the whole time that all these contracts were negotiated, that probably would be a fair way of doing it. But that's not the case. The salary cap has changed. It's going to be going up. And because of that, I think there's a really good possibility that Auston Matthews is going to get more money than a lot of people have thought here. I know I've heard a lot of debate that he can't get McDavid money because he hasn't accomplished what he has. And that might be true, but the 1 year difference that these contracts are going to be negotiated and that change in salary cap could play all the difference here. If we assume for a minute that Auston Matthews ends up being a point per game player, because that's right around where he's at right now. Now he's had some injuries this year. Hopefully if he comes back short term here, it's not out too long because he's currently injured. Let's say he plays around 70 games, gets around 70 points, which is probably a fair estimate on where he may end up this year if he's not out too long with his current injury. So if he's a point-a-game player, let's say he scores around 30 goals, he scored 40 goals last year, you could argue that, yeah, okay, he's accomplished a lot. He was Rookie of the Year. The Leafs had a decent, they made the playoffs last year. They lost in the first round, but they made a good showing. They showed that they were obviously on the rise. This year, they're a lot more solidified. I mean, I know the year's not out yet, but they're definitely in a much better position to be a solid playoff team instead of squeaking in at the last minute. We'll see if he's got a playoff run in him. It's hard to say what can happen in the playoffs, but is it possible that Auston Matthews could be having a couple of rounds of playoffs under his belt? Maybe they'll go further this year. Certainly a decent possibility based on their play so far. Time will tell. So when the negotiations come up, and obviously he's going to negotiate through his agent with Lou Lamoriello, and Lou's been proven to be a stickler on these, especially with younger players. I don't think he's a firm believer that these rookies should be getting these big mega deals. So we'll see how much hardball Lou plays with Matthews' agent. But at the end of the day, he's going to be having a 40-goal season, probably a 30-goal season. He's going to average be a point-a-game player. Hopefully, if things go well for Toronto, he'll have at least a bit of a playoff run to his experience here. So yes, you know what? Maybe he hasn't accomplished everything that Matthews has. But you could probably argue that he's been equally as important for Toronto as McDavid has been for Edmonton. And even though, look at the Oilers, they've got Draisaitl. Leon Draisaitl is one heck of a hockey player and an excellent number 2 man. The Maple Leafs, even though they do have a pretty good team, I don't know if they have a number 2 guy that's Leon Draisaitl worthy. Really, if you look at the supporting cast that Matthews has, not to take away from them, I mean, William Nylander, Mitch Marner, James Van Riemsdyk, they're all pretty good players. Patrick Marleau, not to take anything away from them. But if you look at, really, they don't have a McDavid-Draisaitl combination. Matthews, Nylander, Matthews, Marner, whoever he's playing with, yes, they've done well. They're very good, solid young players. But you could argue that McDavid-Draisaitl is the best 1-2 punch. Now, obviously, they're not quite playing just like it right now. The Oilers are struggling. But really, if you look at it from that standpoint, you could argue that Auston Matthews is more valuable to Toronto than McDavid is to Edmonton because of the supporting cast. So because of that, you could argue that really, if you look at the percentage of the cap that McDavid was given for his contract, that really, I think there's an argument there to say that it should be very similar. So even if they agree that the percentage of the cap going to Matthews is even a little bit less than McDavid, but with a higher cap ceiling, I would not be surprised if you do the math on it. If we end up with an $80 million cap for next season, which is quite possible. The league said probably 78 to 82. Now the players also have the right to, within the CBA, they can do like a cap accelerator, I think it's called, so they can add a 2–2.5% increase onto whatever the league settles. They don't have to, but they have that right. So let's just say we end up down the middle, $80 million. Well, obviously, Matthews' contract's not going to kick in until the following season because he still has 1 year locked on his entry-level deal. So they're probably going to assume when they're doing these negotiations that he's an $82 million cap when this contract kicks in. And Toronto obviously can go to the cap. They've got all kinds of money. There's no issues there. So with this cap increase, I think they can give him pretty well close to $12 million. I mean, he's not going to probably end up quite as low or as high, as McDavid, but because of the cap going up, and you could argue his value to them as compared to McDavid's value to the Oilers, I really don't see it ended up being a lot less. I've heard a lot of arguments there shouldn't be any more than 11. Well, I'm going to say that he gets around 12, if not closer to 12.5. I don't think it's going to be quite 12.5, but I don't think it's going to be too far off. And it doesn't mean that everybody, including the Leafs and his agent, everybody, think he's Connor McDavid. Because at this point, I don't think he is. But that salary cap increase and his level of importance to that team, you can make that argument that he should get pretty well close to that big of a chunk of the cap that McDavid did, and he's equally as important, if not more so. So because of that, I think we're going to end up seeing an Auston Matthews contract north of $12 million. So let me know in the comments, what do you think? What do you think is fair value when Matthews gets his next contract? Do you think it's unfair if he ends up with a very similar number or even more than McDavid? Obviously, like I said, skill level plays a role, their results play a role, but the biggest factor is their level of importance to that team and the salary cap going up. You know, if you look at some other guys like Drew Doughty and Erik Karlsson, John Tavares coming up, look at their old expiring deals that only have either this year or next year left on them. They're not making as much money as some of these younger guys that have done their contracts in the last year. Is that fair? Well, it's not their fault that the salary cap has gone up significantly since those other contracts were negotiated. So it's not all about being fair and comparing skill. There's a lot of factors here. So I want to know what you think. Let me know. Does Auston Matthews get north of $12 million? Is there any chance he gets more money than McDavid? That, I think, would surprise me a bit. But I think it's going to be a lot closer than a lot of people are giving credit for. And that's my opinion. I'd like to know what yours is. If you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Make sure you leave me a comment down below. I want to know your thoughts on the Auston Matthews contract situation. What is he going to get? If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button in the middle of your screen so you can keep watching Top Shelf Hockey.